Whenever we arrived on scene, we confirmed that there were indeed 6 deceased individuals inside the residence, and I'm actually going to read off their names now. The suspect in this, the shooter, is Ronald H. Williams Sr., a 53-year-old male. The 5 other victims in this case are Kelly L. George, a 44-year-old female. The next victim is Carol A. Williams, a 9-year-old female. The next one, Ronald H. Williams Jr., a 7-year-old male. Sarah K. Williams, a 5-year-old female. And Kelly M. McGee-Williams, and she was a 3-year-old female.
The 911 call came in at 8:50 in the morning, and the man on the line was calm. He told the dispatcher he had killed his entire family and that he was about to kill himself. When officers finally pushed through the front door of that house in Winfield, Kansas, they found 6 people dead: a father, a mother, and 4 children between the ages of 3 and 9. And for 3 days, the country believed it understood exactly what had happened here. Because on the 4th day, the Kansas Bureau of Investigation released a single sentence that quietly rearranged everything: who the victims were, who did the planning, and how long this had been coming. And once you understand what they found, the calm voice on that 911 call stops sounding like a confession and starts sounding like the last step of something that was set in motion a very long time ago. Before we get into it, if you want the full picture on cases like this one, the details the early headlines miss, please subscribe to this channel. It genuinely helps these investigations reach more people. Here is what was reported in those first hours, and what most people still believe. On the morning of August 11th, 2026, officers with the Winfield Police Department were already nearby, working an unrelated call, when the report came in from the home near 9th Avenue and Stewart Street. They set up a perimeter. They heard a gunshot. Then they broke through the front door. Inside were 6 members of the same family: the father, Ronald Williams Sr., 53 years old, his wife, Kelly George, 44, and their 4 children: Carol, who was 9, Ronald Jr., who was 7, Sarah, who was 5, and Kelly, who was just 3 years old. Investigators believe the father's fatal wound was self-inflicted, delivered shortly after officers arrived. A police chief with more than 2 decades on the job told reporters he had never seen anything like it. The framing wrote itself, and every early headline used the same words: a father snaps. A man murders his wife and his children, and then himself. A mother and 4 kids, all victims of one man's breakdown. It was a clean, terrible story, and it fit everything the public assumed about a case like this. There was just one problem. According to investigators, it wasn't what happened. To understand why the official story changed, you first have to understand the man at the center of it, because his history was not a secret, it was just scattered. Court records reviewed by investigators and local reporters show that Ronald Williams Sr. had a criminal file stretching back nearly 3 decades. In 1998, he was convicted of attempted indecent liberties with a child, an offense involving a 15-year-old girl, and he was placed on the Kansas Sex Offender Registry, where he remained. But that was only the beginning of the file. Kansas court records show felony charges spanning from 1995 all the way to 2024: drugs, battery, assault on a law enforcement officer, burglary, attempted rape, kidnapping. Those charges were spread across at least 3 different counties: Wyandotte, Johnson, and Franklin. And he did not always go by the same name. Records list him under multiple aliases: Freddie Williams, Laren Williams, Jerome Williams, the kind of fragmentation that lets a history stay broken into pieces small enough that no single agency ever sees the whole shape of it. There was more, buried in the older filings. A 2005 court record describes Williams locking a woman inside his home and threatening to beat her if she tried to leave. Control, confinement, a willingness to trap the people closest to him. Read on its own, it's an ugly footnote. Read in light of what investigators would later conclude, it starts to look like a pattern that had been visible for 20 years. If the record was the background, the neighbors were the foreground, and what they describe is a household that had been sending signals for a long time. The Winfield police chief confirmed that officers had been connected to this family through roughly 20 to 22 separate police reports. And notably, not all of those calls were about the family. Some were made by the family, Williams and George reaching out to police over things that, by the accounts that followed, often didn't quite make sense. A next-door neighbor named Lisa Spoon told reporters that both Williams and his wife were regularly confrontational, shouting at her, at each other, at people simply walking past on the street. She described the behavior as bizarre, erratic, strange. In one account, she said Kelly George accused her elderly mother, a woman in her 90s, on hospice care, unable to walk, of stealing thousands of dollars and stealing her identity. Spoon said George would not let it go, no matter how plainly it made no sense, and running underneath all of it was a detail that neighbors kept returning to. The children were almost never seen, they stayed inside. On a street where the adults were a constant, loud, unavoidable presence, the 4 kids were nearly invisible, present in the house, absent from the world outside it. At the time, it read like strict parenting, or reclusiveness. In hindsight, investigators would give it a different weight. On Friday, August 14th, 3 days after the first headlines, the Kansas Bureau of Investigation released its update, and it did not describe a man who snapped. Agents stated plainly that they did not believe an argument or a physical altercation preceded the killings that morning. There was no fight, no sudden trigger. Instead, the KBI said the evidence indicated that Ronald Williams Sr. and Kelly George, the father and the mother, jointly shared culpability for premeditated plans to kill their children, and then themselves. Read that again because it changes the entire case. The mother, Kelly George, who for 3 days had been counted among the victims, was, according to investigators, not a victim at all. She was, in the words of reporting on the KBI's finding, a co-conspirator. The story was never one parent destroying a family. Investigators say it was 2 parents, together, deciding the same unthinkable thing. And then came the detail that turns the word premeditated from a legal term into a timeline. According to the KBI's preliminary investigation, the firearm recovered at the scene had been purchased by Kelly George in February of 2025, roughly a year and a half before it was ever used. Now, a gun bought in February 2025 is not by itself proof of a plan formed in February 2025. But it means the weapon that ended 6 lives had been sitting inside that home, in that family, for 18 months. Whatever this was, it was not the product of a single bad morning. But here is where the case refuses to sit still. Because the same investigation that used the word premeditated also documented something that seems to pull in the opposite direction. The KBI noted that both Williams and George had displayed erratic behavior in the lead-up to the shootings, including what the agency described as a pattern of making nonsensical statements to law enforcement, to neighbors, and to others in the community. Nonsensical, not calculating, not cold, nonsensical. So which was it? How does a couple making statements that struck everyone around them as irrational also carry out a plan that investigators describe as premeditated and jointly shared? These 2 things, visible mental deterioration and deliberate long-form planning, are not supposed to live comfortably in the same case, and yet here they do. It's the question the official statement doesn't answer, and it may be the question that defines whatever comes next, whether what happened in that house was madness or method, or the terrible place where the 2 of them meet. There's a reason this finding is difficult to absorb, and it isn't only the horror of it. Cases where one parent kills a family are, tragically, part of the record that people who follow these stories know too well. But cases where investigators say both parents jointly plan to kill their own children together are far rarer, and they carry a different kind of weight. A single perpetrator can be explained, however inadequately, as one mind-breaking. A shared plan requires 2 people to arrive at the same decision, to hold it and to keep holding it in the same house, at the same table, around the same 4 children, for however long it took. And that is what makes the 18-month gap so heavy. If the KBI is right that this was jointly premeditated, then somewhere in that year and a half there were ordinary days, school mornings, meals, birthdays, a child turning 9, another turning 3. The investigator's finding asks us to hold 2 images at once, a family functioning enough to go unremarked for months, and 2 parents privately aligned on an ending. That contradiction between the surface and the plan is not a flaw in the reporting. It may be the truest and most disturbing thing about the case. From an investigative standpoint, the KBI's statement is careful in a way worth noticing. Agents said the evidence indicates a jointly shared, premeditated plan, but they have not publicly detailed what that evidence is. They have not said whether it rests on writings, messages, purchases, statements to others, or the physical scene itself. In a case where both alleged planners are dead, that evidence is the only thing that can ever speak for what happened, and how the agency weighs it will shape the official history of these deaths. Several concrete questions remain genuinely open. What, beyond the timing of the firearm purchase, points to a plan formed well in advance rather than a shared decision made in the final days? How do investigators reconcile the description of nonsensical, erratic statements with a finding of premeditation? Was there a formal assessment of the couple's mental state, and will it ever be made public? And with more than 20 prior police contacts tied to this family, will there be any review of whether the warning signs, scattered as they were, could have been read differently at the time? None of these have answers yet. The KBI has said its findings, once complete, will go to the Cowley County Attorney, the office that will decide what, if anything, is formally concluded on the public record. It's worth being precise here, because a case this raw is easy to get wrong. What investigators have stated is this: that 6 members of one family died in that home, that the evidence points to the 2 parents having jointly planned the deaths of their 4 children and themselves, that they do not believe an outside argument or attacker set it off, and that, at this time, there is no evidence anyone other than Williams and George was responsible. The firearm, per the KBI, was purchased by George in early 2025. What has not been established is the why. A motive has not been publicly stated. The exact sequence inside the home that morning has not been laid out. And the deeper question, how 2 people slid from a household of loud, strange, over-policed dysfunction into a shared decision to kill their own children, remains, for now, unanswered. The KBI has said its completed findings will be presented to the Cowley County Attorney, and that no further information will be released at this stage. The investigation is ongoing. If cases like this matter to you, the ones where the first story and the true story turn out to be 2 different things, subscribing to this channel is the best way to keep following the leads as they develop. In the days after, Winfield did what wounded towns do. A local church organized a vigil. Donations arrived from multiple states, some earmarked for the first responders who had to walk through that door. Because whatever the investigators ultimately conclude about the 2 adults in that house, 4 children, 9, 7, 5, and 3, are gone, and they had no part in any plan. They are the only people in this story who were, without question, victims. This video is based on official statements from the Kansas Bureau of Investigation and the Winfield Police Department, court records, and credible reporting available at the time of production. The investigation is ongoing and some details may change as it continues. Nothing here is intended to state legal conclusions beyond what officials have confirmed. If you or someone you know is struggling, please reach out to a local crisis line. Help is available.